Hello, everybody. Welcome to the ConTech Exec. I have got a new friend here today from Marked Up AI. It's Christopher Mouflard. Man, Chris, I'm going to say you and I have already had some great conversations just in, kind of preparing for today. And, we've got a lot of things that we could talk about. Today, we want to talk about Marked Up AI. And again, folks are going to want to know a little bit more about you, kind of what's your background. And I always want to know, what makes you want to be in this crazy business we call construction? And especially on the ConTech side of the world, it's a crazy place to be. So kind of give me that idea. You're walking the job site or you're doing the work and said, yeah, this markup is terribly broken. We got to fix it.
Well, Robert, thanks for having me. Always good to speak with like-minded folks that are trying to push forward other people in front of us, right? That's like we stand on the shoulders of giants, I think is a really cliche but important phrase because there's so many people that came before us. But how did I get into this? That's one thing I will think. I think a lot of people in construction thank somebody in their family. I think it's kind of passed down. Yeah. But one of my first jobs, I was 12 years old. My mom was building a house and I was given a broom.
Yeah, that happens to the best of us, man.
And so I would say that's where I started. And it was like a love at first sight thing. I've been struck with that twice. Once when I met my wife and once when I learned about carpentry. And
nice.
So that was really my first experience, bluntly, and probably shouldn't tell this to everybody, but I wasn't very good at high school.
Yeah.
So I ended up loving the trades because it was something that I could actually be good at. And that's really what set me up in this industry. And so I learned it from there and went to night school to get my certificate. I was living in Australia, so you do like your builder's certificate.
Yeah.
Because the idea was that I could start early in the morning, finish early in the afternoon, and then go surf.
You got to get your priorities straight, right? I get it.
Well, when you're 16,
Yeah, no, I get it. Well, and I would also say, look, man, I wouldn't worry too much about that high school thing. It's like, Albert Einstein didn't, do very well in school either. Smart people don't necessarily do very well sometimes when they're kind of feeling like they're kind of held back. So I get it.
Yeah. I went to a particularly old school grammar military college. So it was pretty up and down, if you will, which was great. It's like what I needed, but I was not thriving in that environment where construction did. And night school was a blast for me. I was learning how to draft by hand. Could you imagine they drafting by hand, teaching you how to estimate? You were in the building codes, then you're designing the thing. And so you get this extraordinary appreciation for the level of effort that it actually takes to understand how the lintel sits above the window and sizing it. So it was, and then going out into site and building it, right?
Yeah.
It was a really incredible experience for me and very,
I tell you, I honestly, truly too was blessed with some great teachers in my high school level for architectural drawing. When I went to Purdue University after, I was already way ahead of some of the kids that were in, some of my engineering classes because I had already done all this stuff. And I did. I learned, drafting by hand. I ended up getting my first, kind of 2 internships at General Motors working in the drafting departments and stuff like that. And I was already kind of way ahead of the curve. And it was due to the fact that, I think the guys that were teaching it kind of got it. It was always about hands-on, right? It's always about... hey, you're not going to learn it unless you're out there kind of doing it. That was then. So I got to give credit to those folks. They really did teach me well in those departments.
Yeah, I think that it's an important art. And look, I'm like an old school BIM nerd, right? So fast forward a little bit, I ended up being pretty good at night school. I was good at accounting. I liked numbers. I was good at the drafting. I like materials science, right? Like all those really tactile things where you start something and you see a result. I loved all that stuff. I ended up getting into university, which was a real big pivot because I was like, I have to go to university full time and it's during the day. And it's changed. I think it's changed a lot, which I can talk about in a minute, but I had to work at a bar at night to pay the rent. So that's how I got through university. But to your point, which is really incredible, I can't think of one class that I took over my short university career, 2.5 years, that had anything to do with actual drawing, and yet contracts, actual construction, everything from the bid to putting a shovel in the ground, everything happens on the 2D drawing. And those 2.5 years had nothing to do with the central thing of construction, which is the plans. And so it's just I think a big miss.
I think it's very interesting because, and then I've heard this talked about just here recently, where we've got some folks coming out of school, not to say they're not smart or they don't have the aptitude, but it's the idea that they get out to a job site, and it's the premise is more common than not, where all of a sudden you put a set of plans in front of somebody for the real thing, right? Whether they're a project engineer or assistant project manager, I don't care. You put a set of plans in front of somebody and they're lost. And I experienced this firsthand when I was, running my own show and bringing in new kids on the I'll call them new kids, right? But bringing in the kids to, have their first, job as, assistant project manager. And I would be like, okay, I need you to go look this up and this up in the set of plans. And it was like a deer in the headlights. They had no idea where to go in the plans, what to look at, what to look for. Some of the symbols, they didn't understand what that meant. I'm like, wait a minute, didn't you just graduate from Texas A&M? Didn't you just graduate from
excellent schools?
Excellent schools. And I'm not bagging on Texas A&M. I'm just saying, again, it's like, it doesn't matter what university came from. They could have come from Michigan. They could have come from Purdue. They could have come from, anywhere. The story more often than not is, hey, these kids aren't ready because they've really never even been in a set of plans and spent some time with them. I know when I first kind of made the transition from being in carpentry, being a carpenter, I was a journeyman carpenter for about 10 years. All right. And I know that when I was their apprentice, I had a lot of learning to do. And I literally was poring over, sets of plans as an apprentice because I had to know, how this thing built, and I had specific sections that I would learn about. But then it was like, once I made that transition, I was already there. I was way ahead of kind of the game. So it's interesting to see, that kind of thing happening.
And it's recent too. I'm going to give you the founding story of Marked Up, and but it's central to exactly what we're talking about is, I've got a younger brother. His name's Harry. He lives in Australia. And when he was 18, he came, visited us. We were living in Dallas. And he's like, I finished my high school. They call it higher school certificate. Same thing as your SATs in the States or your baccalaureate in Europe. And he's like, I finished high school. I got good grades. He's a smart kid. Unfortunately, he's very handsome as well. A little frustrating, but he's like, what should I do? And I said, well, you could go do a law degree. Incredibly important to understand contracts. Shit, your grades are so good. You could probably go do medicine, right? Mm-hmm. But that's all that. I said, I did construction because it gave me that physical thing, right? Where I can be there from the conception to the handover of a thing. And I think that that's extremely fulfilling. But then I got a bit of law. I got a bit of physics. I got material science. I got all these really incredibly practical skills that can give me so many more angles in my life. And I have not been a straight line through my life, like most of us, meaning that I wanted to be a fireman when I was a kid. I didn't end up being a fireman. But, this is December 2023. It's pretty recent. And now he's a couple years older. He started this thing called a cadetship where he's working 3-4 days a week, full time on a construction project, getting paid kind of like $100 a day for working crazy hours. And then he's at university from 8 a.m. till 10 p.m. Mm-hmm. So he's pretty wrecked. He's working hard. And we went back to Australia after I told him to go do construction, right? So that's kind of that. And he's like, why did you tell me to do this? I hate this. And I'm like, man, what's going on? Tell me what has happened, because you got all the things, dude. You got it going on. And he's like, well, I ordered, I'm working on this school project and I had to order windows. And so I ordered, I forget the numbers. I ordered 56 windows. I went to the schedule. I read to the drawings. I went to the schedule. The schedule said I needed 56 windows of these varying types. I ordered the 56 windows. 12 weeks later, show up to the project. There's only 48 window holes, openings.
Yeah. It's tough to fit 50. 48.
And I was like, first of all, where was your manager? Well, he's busy. He's not just managing this project. He's managing the bigger project, right? There's 4 build. Anyways. And he's just like, I feel so culpable. We spent 100 something thousand more on Windows. And he's like, I just feel so bad and blah, blah, blah. And I have all these problems. And I'm like, oh man. I was like, okay, well, tell me what process you went through. He's like, well, I have Bluebeam and Excel. And I was like, that's what I used in 2008 and 2000. That's stuff that I used when I was really early in learning. And I was like, we're trying to diagnose well, and he's like, now I know what to do. I can highlight and I can search. But I was like, any part of this is not just even a little bit automated. There's no way to count all the window types of that thing. And then it just because having been a BIM nerd, I know that if you use AutoCAD, that's a manual process to update the schedule. Sure. And in a Revit or an ArchiCAD, which are the more modern platforms for authoring, that while the integration is there, as in that window, that in the schedule, if you don't update stuff before it's published as a submittal drawing, then it doesn't update the schedule. So I could understand in his brain why he made that mistake, and unfortunately had no support nor oversight. So It's hardly his fault, but he took it. You know what I mean? And that is just speaks to this amazing, avoidable amount of rework and waste that we experienced. Was just, he lacked the oversight. And secondly, was using tools that are really strong, very good at what they do, but they didn't help him, right? They didn't alert him.
Yeah. That gets a little confusing too, because you start to think that that's not where, updates, when updates happen, obviously there should be some sort of schedule of responsibility for who's updating the drawings, documenting when they got updated, right? Also documenting, updating a schedule, especially if you're talking about the change of, 56 windows to 48.
Yeah.
I mean, these are big things.
Right.
Okay. Because there's several areas right there, right, that get updated. Not only are you going to have to change the schedule for your windows, but you're going to need to change your materials for then what goes over the top of those windows that you're not putting in. You're going to have a materials increase, again, if it's residential, you've got wood or something like that that's going to be framing that stuff in. You've got insulation package. You've got everything. As soon as you make any adjustment to this thing, everything kind of changes, even a little bit. And you certainly never want to come short, right? Especially with supply chain lines now. You never want to come short of material, because guess what? Now you're really going to screw with the schedule when that happens, right? One of my first bosses, he built custom homes. Did 2 homes a year. Everything was over 9,000 square feet. They were, really big custom homes. There was a 3-year wait for him to build your house. I got lucky, right? Because I worked with some best of the best. And I remember the first bit of advice he gave me, because we had just finished framing walls on the house. We're getting ready to do we had just finished the roof, and there were some pieces left over. Let's put, from the roof components, the rafter components. And he's like, I need you to get a Sawzall, and I need you to cut these things up, and we're going to, reutilize some of this for blocking. And I'm like, man, why do we have some left over? And he goes, he says, well, Bob, because we make mistakes. We just don't advertise. Yeah, I thought that was hilarious. But it's one of those early ones where it's like, yeah, we're going to make mistakes. We just don't need to really advertise about it. And I just think, there's little nuggets of advice, that you get from kind of being out there working. And this is one of those things that your brother's going to remember this forever. You're going to remember it forever, because again, it's that's where people learn. And so I guess this becomes the whole idea for Marked Up, right? It's hey, we really got to get this right. We got to get this process right.
Yeah. It's not just the Harry, right? I use him as the new entrant to our industry. We've spoken with probably more than 350 architects and general contractors now. This is over the last year and a half, we've been very serious about building Marked Up.
Mm-hmm.
And what's incredible, and I can kind of relate this to some of the work I did as a BIM VDC manager early in my career, is that a lot of the issues that people have with drawings are that they're just incomplete, which is crazy to say out loud. And I know that architects and engineers, they work hard. They are putting a lot of effort into designing the best thing and making sure that the deliverable is excellent for the owner and for the GC. But, maybe it's the authoring tools, maybe it's the handover of work, maybe it's because it's a professional service-based business. when that gets handed over to the GCs, typically they're spending the first amount of time just, do I have everything I need? And the example that I give that a lot of people go like, oh yeah, is like the sheet index. Does the sheet index, which is often going to end up as a contractual submission, does that have every page that's actually in the set?
Oh, there you go. Yeah, right. Hey, we're missing a page here on the, yeah, that's
or we
a
have
good one.
Or we have an extra one, that is done a lot. And that is a very basic check. But if you think about it, that is a human going, all right, I have 250, whatever, some amount of pages, and I'm going to go page by page and check, even if it took 30 seconds per page. Those aren't just the basic checks that people have to deal with. There's even the potentially hundreds of call out symbols referencing a detail somewhere else. Those are often those should be validated, or tags in schedules, or quantities of tags in schedules, or dimension lines, which are the most prolific thing and arguably the most important thing that probably most people never check. We just rely on it. And often there's terminology, at least on the sheet specs, that tell you like, it's your responsibility to check that the dimension's correct.
That's right. That's front page, by the way, right? On a set of drawings, that's front page. It's like, hey, by the way, Arizona Mission says this. Look, if it's not here, let me know, because we think this is as complete as it can possibly be, but we're not perfect, right?
Yeah.
And you always hear folks complain about this, and I'm sure hopefully we'll hear about it in the comments, because I always like to hear the stories. But, get a set of drawings, 70, 80% complete, maybe. I always loved like roof drawings I used to get, roof frames, where they couldn't quite figure out how the angle was going to really work out between a couple of different planes. And they just put in kind of a gray area. It's like, well, you guys figure it out when you get there. It'll come to you.
Artist interpretation, please.
Yeah, I mean, really, no, this is like the carpenter's interpretation of like, how's this, eyebrow going to come in here, on this, double hip roof that's, two different planes, two different levels, two different angles. And it's a lot. Okay. But again, you got some really smart guys. Again, they know they've got smart guys out there in the field that will get it. And so for them, it saves a little bit of time. And so I've heard kind of two sides of this story. There's the one side that says, we got an excellent architect or an excellent engineer, but they're strapped, by time constraints. They've bid, X amount of hours for said service. And then get to those hours, and then all of a sudden you're down to the bottom line. It's like, hey, I need minimum viable product. Right. And that's what you get when, you get minimum viable product, especially if they're behind, or they've only been paid so much for said services by client, and the client doesn't want them going over hours on a more complete set, or, missing details. And I always say, look at it as well as like, I think what happens is it gets down into some of those boilerplate, designs when it comes to the detail. Right.
Yeah, for sure.
They've got you just thinking about, kind of any kind of, like a rafter on top of a wall, how it attaches and what it attaches with. Well, that could be several different things, right? In residential. Commercial, it's, totally different. Again, it's like how your steel comes together and what's this up underneath it, all these kind of different
things. The base plate, whatever, seismic,
right,
et cetera. Yeah.
The attachments and all the things that go around it. Like, again, how we're going to put the envelope on it. What's that look like? What does the flashing look like? And they've got all these different boilerplate. Well, how difficult would it be? Oh, I picked the wrong detail, because basically I copied the boilerplate detail, which said it was this, thing, and then you copied it and pasted it into the set of drawings that you had. It can't be too hard to really screw that up, because there's a lot to choose from. And especially if you're in a hurry, or if it's like close enough kind of thing. Well, it's close. It's close enough. And plus, I also have this thing at the very front end of this set of drawings that says, by the way, if you notice something that's going to be a little bit out, you're supposed to tell me, and then we'll fix it in an RFI, right? I mean, we are human,
We are human.
And like, architects don't wear capes, the last time I checked. And so, I think a lot of times it comes down to, humans will do kind of minimum viable product, especially if pushed in that direction.
It's also overload. And, I think about the first big project that I was on, because similar to you, I was on not custom homes, but like home renovations is what I was
Yeah.
working on as a kid. And then university, then I got to go on a mega project, a $1 billion hospital project.
Yeah.
Massive. I forget the exact numbers, but let's say that there was 25 of us project engineers. There was, I think, 4 architects. And that is a lot more than any normal project would get. But given the scale, the client, the rest of it, it was what was needed. But then you think about the architects had their day job, plus 25 project engineers, 10 project managers, like going to their desks, emailing them, calling them, like that's a lot of overload. That's a lot to organize and to then also get
and they're not just working on that one project too.
Yeah. Yes.
Right. I always look at this too when you say, whether you're talking about an architect or you're talking about a superintendent who has multiple jobs that he's, overseeing. Project managers the same way. We got this big one. They may not necessarily be dedicated to just one, job site. And so, yeah, there's a lot of stretched thin in this industry, which leaves a lot of room for mistakes, right?
Yeah, I heard a really sad statistic. I think, unfortunately, construction, we deal with some of the highest rates of burnout and suicide.
We do. It's one in 7. Career. Yeah, it's 1 in 7, man. It's crazy. I did the numbers on this. It was something like every hour. 1 in 7.
I mean, I don't.
It's crazy. I want to say every, like during an 8-hour day, but it's crazy. And I don't know.
That's so sad.
The statistics on that don't necessarily shed any light on, what level these people are at, as far as is this in the labor category? Is this in the superintendent category, foreman category, pressure categories, project manager categories? It could be just across the board. No, it's a huge deal. It's a huge deal. And that, that could be a whole topic for another time, because again, like you could have this is how big that is it's staggering. The numbers are staggering, but it does go to the stretched thin, the demand, and I don't see it getting any better. I'm hoping the statistics on the depression and suicide rates gets better.
Yeah.
I'm hoping that kind of thing, but I don't know that the pressure and the demand are going to get any lighter.
It's a beautiful industry for that reason. We all got to live somewhere. We all got to work somewhere. We all want to go to the hospital. We all want to drive. We got to drive to these places. The reality is that our built world is created by this human power. And I don't think that will ever change, no matter, I have maybe controversial views on robotics and things like this. I just think that the human touch, that experience, you're never going to get away from it. Just as much as I believe, even though what we're doing is try to help with just the beginning part of a drawing review, that 25 years of building it, I know you can't put a bolt up there.
You can't even fit your hand. Yeah, I love that you drew it here, but you can't even fit your hand in the space that you're trying to tell me that you're going to put this 6-inch bolt in. Yeah, no, I get it.
But that's, back to, I think it's worth an episode, and I'm not going to be your expert on that, Robert. But yeah. I think this topic is worth an episode because it's so visceral. What we can only hope for, and again, I have a view on this, which is we need technology that fixes like right now problems in construction. Like there are things that are happening right now, like just a more complete set or a way to better bend a pipe, right? Like there are things in construction right now that need attention. And I don't want to future cast these, with enough money and enough resources, we could build this thing, which will be really good for you in 10 years. I don't think that that's good enough, frankly. I think it's probably important to a certain extent, but when there's so much to do right now, I think that that's where we can really make an incremental difference in the lives of the pre-construction teams, the construction site teams. All the rest.
And I love what you said there about the incremental difference. We talk about this all the time on this program. I've written about it. We're not going to see successes in grand strides, right? It's just not going to happen. We have to start seeing incremental improvements, right? And to make those incremental improvements, guess what? We're going to have to spend a little money. I know you don't want to, folks out there, contractors, GC, specialty, whatever your guys are doing. Talking about spending money makes people nervous, and it gets the CFO starts to wring his hands. But I'm going to tell you right now, we've got to focus more on there are technology advances that can help. There are spare spaces where training and process correction is going to have to come into place. Right. And I do say this before software, because there is technology out there, right? But before software, let's look at your bottleneck processes first. Let's look at the things that are tripping you up and why. Is it a people problem? Is it a process problem? You need to figure that out first before you think you're going to slap some software on it and think it's going to correct it. Right. But we do have to take these measures to find those out, and then take a bit of technology to help try to solve them. Because, again, you can correct your process, but if you're still putting the stress on said human, where it's going to take them 2-3 more hours a day, but it could take them 15 minutes if we applied some technology to it, then that's what you need to do. That's how this has to roll. Because we're going to solve the problems like overwork, lack of capacity, lack of labor, those types of things. We're going to have to, look at the process of how it works before we then slap solutions on it that technology says, this is how we can make this better. It's a good process, but this is how we can make it better.
Yeah. I was fortunate back on that big job to have a tremendous boss and mentor. His name's Christopher Mouflard. I give him a shout out here, but his whole thing was people, process, and then tools.
Yes.
And everything that we thought through was centered around not how can this tool fix this for you, but let me diagnose and understand your problems. Let's figure out the best process and then put the best tool that we have available in place of supporting you.
Correct.
And sometimes, and back then, often that was literally a sticky note on a wall. That might have been the best solution to support a better planning process on that job. But, I think that you're spot on, Robert. It's so critical, and we can often jump to the, what does my friend call it? Like the painkiller.
Yeah.
But sometimes we don't need a pain. Yeah, the easy button. Sometimes that is good. I'm not suggesting it's bad, but I think that there's, maybe there's something to say for doing 10 push-ups.
Yeah. No, I get it. I see, look, the Staples easy button, folks, that was a commercial. There is no such thing as the easy button, even though we'd all like it. Guess what? It's TV, it's programming, it's totally fictional. It does not exist, right? So let's be clear about that. But I mean, to your point though, stop and think about this. The old saying is a poor carpenter blames his tools, right?
Yeah.
Let's be clear. You've got a good carpenter has a process, right? And a good carpenter follows that process religiously because it works. If you're building a chair, right, and you don't start with the seat first, right? You gotta look at the legs because that's going to be the foundation of the whole thing, right? And so when you're building a house, when you're building a building, let's look at the concrete and let's look at the soil. First, let's look at it. What's underneath? What are we looking at? What's the topography? What's the weather? What's the climate? Again, start from, it's building blocks for a reason, So we've got to look at, and each one of these has a process, right?
Yes.
And we've put a lot of stuff around it, especially with technology. We've put a lot of things around it. I just wrote an article yesterday about this very thing. All of our processes, everything we're doing in construction will soon be poked, prodded, analyzed in 6 different ways from Sunday, right? Because of digital technology. I'm not saying that's not needed, because I'm saying as we move into the age of AI, we're going to have those things, because we're going to have to bring proof to the next job. We're going to have to be able to say, hey, we measured this digitally with these systems on these last 3 jobs, and this is why we're qualified for this next one, right? It's going to become a standard.
Yes.
And that's because technology has pushed its way into our doors, and it's here to stay. Now, and what we're going through is the growing pains of how do we get the two to really work together so it's more of a fluid environment, right? It's got like we were talking about earlier, it's got a bit of a flow to it, right? Because you're adding in something that's supposed to be seamless into a process that's not necessarily seamless right now. And so they're conflicting. They're bumping heads, especially kind of out in the field. And then do they talk to each other? Is there interoperability? Are those things going to be there? And we're moving into an age where, guess what? We have to have those processes in place, right, that work together to then be able to provide proof of what's next.
Yeah, you kind of bring up a lot of themes here, which I think are important to touch on. But I think this technological revolution, to the point about poking and prodding into all these things, could be a catalyst for, for a significant amount of change. And I think there's a lot of unstructured data that will be structured in by the use of LLMs, et cetera. But I think that the more interesting thing is recently I was in Boston for this Boston Built Week conference. And I don't often go to these, but it was an amazing opportunity. And I want to say that I met with like 20 or 30 or so other founders, all building different things in construction. And if I rewind the clock to 2009, I joined Vico Software. There was I want to say a handful. I was in one city with 20 or 30 other founders, all building stuff for construction technology. Not very long ago, 15 years ago or so, there was 6.
Yeah.
There wasn't that much out there. I just think that we are starting to attract all this incredible brain power, and all that can lead us to is more ways that we can try to support better, safer, more profitable construction jobs. And hopefully that trickles down to the field, back to my comments on we got to do stuff that means stuff right now.
Yeah.
Because hopefully that will improve the condition, that headache, the stress. You told me that the design's incomplete. You guys have to go away. Now you lost a crew.
Yeah.
All those types of things. The dream is, can we make this technology can we make whatever these tools are so good that the actual process can fundamentally improve? And so, I think that there is a lot to be excited for.
Yeah, a lot to be excited for. And, there's been a lot of progress made in it already. There are already tools out there that have made a difference statistically, made a difference in a lot of different contractors' lives. And there are still some that are, behind the curve quite a bit. And I think that idea of maybe 70% of these rollouts are where they kind of fail. I think this all leads to this new generation of the combination of construction-oriented person with a tech, background and a tech idea, or even a software idea of how we can meld the two together, right?
Yeah.
It's going to continue to lead towards that and lean in towards that. And it's a whole new set of kind of rules. And I think the reason it's so attractive in construction is because all the problems haven't been solved yet, And it's funny because now, as Silicon Valley's out there, they're now moving into vibe coding and doing all this kind of stuff because they got, their AI products, which can code better and faster than 80% of their software engineers. Now we're going to focus on something else. Now instead of it taking a long time for technology to catch up, now the thing is that now it's going to take a long time for the technology to work its way into the construction, which is this complex beast of, several different solutions. And so it's this confluence of ideas that we're just sitting here trying to have to sort through and figure out, okay, what's going to be important first. And I think that's one of the big battles is we were just at Groundbreak this past month. I was saying the same thing every time. It looks like it's 10,000 people walking around here going, where do I start? Even though they probably already started, they're like, well, okay, where do I start now? We've got new products. We've got new AI this, and we've got new AI that. And where do I start? And I have some funny conversations with some of the vendors. They're like, yeah, we had guys come up saying, do you have AI? It's like it's something in a box somewhere, like, oh, yeah, I got one back here. I'm buying a set of brakes for my car. So it's just kind of funny. But again, I think it is kind of the new frontier of big business, because here's the thing. We're going to have it. If we're going to continue down this path of AI and having more data centers, we're going to have infrastructure products that support the new energy structures, whether that's alternative energy, solar products, wind products, gas, oil, nuclear. We're going to have all of those things kind of in place in order to support what we're really trying to build with this. We're going to have roads. we're going to have housing. We're going to have factories. We're going to have all these different things. And there's, every one of these requires electricity, requires plumbing, requires welding, requires, framing, building, steel, erection, everything, concrete, everything. It's going to require people that have, knowledge in the business and people that want to have knowledge in the business to really come together and do this kind of stuff, because this is where the money's going to be. This is where the jobs are going to be. And I got a feeling that the GDP, I think our 13% market share, I guess, is going to get bigger.
For sure.
Because you can't have any more technology if you don't have what they call now compute, meaning, the energy structures, the water, those kind of things to help it grow. So this is where it's going to be.
I think it's an incredibly exciting time to be American, to be in the United States. There's this reindustrialization that's happening that touches so much. I know we're getting a little off topic here, but I can't be more excited about what's going on, because being part of this industry, it is the cornerstone of how all this gets done.
Yeah.
And to your point, multifamily residential is one of the fastest growing sectors over the last 10 years. Texas is like literally the epicenter of this. There's an exceptional amount of data to just show that it's been like a X increase since 2009 to today. Just the amount of just demand for built environment, it's not going anywhere. The supply chains on both ends, meaning that there's capital ready to go. There are GCs and developers that want to do this stuff. They can't find the architects and the engineers, and they can't find the subtrades to actually design and build this stuff. But the people demand isn't going away. And again, if we just pick on Texas, you got 3 amazing cities. I mean, I'm a fan of Austin and Dallas, but Houston's still a massive city. Those cities are growing, growing people. But that trend is kind of across the United States. And I think all of this really means something when all right, if I can shave off 15 minutes or an hour per plan review because I didn't have to check for this basic stuff, but I'm going to bid on 50, 60, 70 projects this year. That is like time back to bid more, or to, I don't know, go home an hour early to shave. Maybe that's a little bit less stress of having to sit down and check 900 call outs today. Right. And going back, I'm just really big on this. There are things where these AI technologies make a lot of sense. And those are those repetitive tasks that computers are supposed to have taken over for us already. We ended up kind of inverting this over the last little while, where it was incumbent upon us to open the drawing and then find everything and go through it, or enter in the document or the form in a way. That's going to shift. We can use technologies where we just speak, the form is filled out. This is a perfect application for daily logs and things like that. But then also kind of what we're talking about, these highly unstructured drawing data sets, where just tell me where I got to focus, at least on my first pass. And with that in mind, that just alerts the Harry. I'm brand new in the industry. I kind of don't really know where to start, but tell me what I should be, tell me that this thing, so that I can either go get some help or something else. Or for the seasoned estimator, whose probably bill rate is $250 an hour or something like that. And if you're asking him to sit down for 2 or 3 hours to make sure it's a complete set of drawings, surely that internal bill rate could be applied better. Right. And so, or you're handing it back to a Harry. No offense, Harry. I keep picking on him. You know what I mean? And he's the youngest person in the room with the least amount of experience. And now you're putting a big amount of emphasis. And this is the cycle that we're going through, where I felt we all feel winning is in the human nature. But then when you fail and it's so visible, that hurts. And I must say, it's not important to fail. We all should learn how to fail. But that can be really hurtful. That can really damage kind of your progress. And so anyways.
Yeah. Well, again, when you fail, it's okay to fail. This is where we learn, right? What we want to avoid is the fail big, right? There are scales of this, right? There are things you don't do. It's the same thing as not putting a $250 an hour estimator, on checking over a set of drawings. You don't do that. Second thing is, you probably don't put the newbie that just dropped onto the job in front of this task as well, especially when there are hundreds of thousands of dollars probably on the line, without kind of any foresight or any oversight of what are the potential things that can happen. It's the same thing, though, when you utilize a technology, right? You don't just, turn it on, plug and play, and say, must be right, straight out of the gate. And, this is the pushback that you get a lot of times when you start to work with teams and you start to work with guys that have been, well, if I've got to check this person's work, why don't I just do it myself? And we've all heard that before, right? The time it takes me to check this guy's work, I might as well just do it myself, right?
For sure.
Sometimes that's just human nature, the people that are in front of these jobs, because these are doers, right? We're talking about people that, man, I've got so much experience. I've done this 1,000 times. I could do this in my sleep. Why can't you do this, dummy? You know what I mean? And then I got to check your work. I don't have enough time in the day. That reasoning doesn't work, because the truth is you're going to have to check it the first couple, maybe 3-4 times, right? And then it's going to learn, right? And then you're going to have a bit more trust in it. You're going to find the areas, right? These systems that we're developing, these things that we're trying to put into place, whether, I don't care if it's a human in that spot or if it's some sort of technology, you've got to test it, learn small, or test it, test small, learn big, right? Yeah. You've got to test it, you've got to retest it, and you've got to learn the lessons from it so that you learn something next and it improves the product. And we're not used to that. We're all in such a rush. I can't do that. I hear the word, I can't do that because I've got this, and this on my plate. And what that tells me is that, yeah, you've got a lot on your plate. I get it, but you're not focusing on the big picture. You're focusing on this week. What I'm trying to tell you is I'm focusing on, 6 months from now, when this is no longer on your plate, and the time that you're spending now. And a lot of folks just don't see it that way. That's the pushback that you get. That's where that friction, that's where that tension comes in our industry. And it's at every level, because everybody's stretched thin. I got 5 different jobs and they've got their core competencies of what they're looking at. And then all of a sudden we're trying to add this thing over the top of them that's supposed to help them out, but it's not going to help you out at first. And I think that's the thing that I want to pass along to anybody that's out there in this industry. Guess what? When somebody puts a new tool in your hands, it's not going to help you immediately unless you're already kind of versed with the tool. Somebody puts a new 5-pound sledge in your hand that you haven't been using. Guess what? It's going to take a little while for your arm to get strong.
And your hands to get rough, I'll tell you what.
Right, yeah, you know what I'm saying. It doesn't matter, again, I know that's a very simple analogy, but again, you start to use a new tool, you're not going to be an expert at it right off the bat. But I will say, when it comes to technology, there are some things about it that are going to be fantastic that you're going to realize, and then you're going to get more adept. It's going to get more adept, especially when we start to talk about, artificial AI, when it actually, you're training it, when you're building a product that actually learns. I think that's important.
It's an incredible time to be creating software. I think that the one thing that I want to cap on what you're saying is that construction is quite literally a life and death industry, meaning that if we don't get it right, it could fall over. Mm-hmm. And that is just untenable in terms of the expectation of how we have to have a lot of confidence that what we are doing, that the bid's correct. Because if I don't get the bid correct and win the job, well, there's significant financial repercussions. I got to design this thing appropriately, because if I don't, it could collapse. These are like existential types of issues. And so the big thing that I think a lot about is I got to be more accurate than a seasoned superintendent when it comes to, if I'm going to make a recommendation that something's wrong, it's got to be, so you have to have a lot of confidence that thing that that system that you're training, that product that you're delivering is as accurate or more accurate than a seasoned superintendent. It's also got to be as fast as understanding goes as an architect or engineer, right? They have to have that competition. And the last thing, which is the whole reason why we're trying to use technology for this stuff, is that it should be way cheaper than the cheapest paid intern, right? And so this is the confluence of opportunity that technology can give us. And this is how we're positioning technologies like we're building it marked up, because otherwise, if the barrier is that much a year, I'll just do it myself, right? Then now you're missing an opportunity because you've over-indexed on the types of technologies. But then if the result that they're getting is, it was 80% right,
Yeah.
That's frankly not good enough.
Yeah, not
Like,
good enough.
that's not good enough. This thing has to be like, we're working on like the final standard deviations of this stuff, like truly trying to split percentages at the highest level, because we know that if people want to trust what we do, it better be damn right. And, back to speed, got to make it faster than a human can do it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, a human's going to do it.
Well, I think the important part here is to look at, we have to have a bit of a mindset shift, right? We have to, if you're a contractor out there, I don't care what you're doing, you're a GC, contractor, project manager, whatever you're doing, you have to figure out ways to quote Dan Martell, you got to figure out ways to buy back your time. Whether that's some sort of technology, whether that's hiring somebody new, it wouldn't make a difference, right? Yeah. You got to figure out ways to buy back your time to do the things that are more into your core competency, more into what's, getting yourself in front of what's truly important, but making sure that the things that you're covering with, whether it's a new employee or whether it's some sort of piece of technology, those items are just as accurate or more accurate than you would have been doing it yourself. And you're not spending that extra 3-4 hours, whatever it is, on whatever that task is, right? Because you have to, especially if you're stretched thin, which you probably are, you've got to figure out, okay, where do I draw the line? How do I, again, buy back my time? How do I get back what I need to get to the items that are probably a little bit more critical for me to focus on while I've got these other things covered? It's no different than 10 years ago, 20 years ago, where everybody talks about the importance of delegation, those types of things. So products like Marked Up, again, is one of those things where you're going to be accurate with your stuff by utilizing this. And yes, there's going to be some cost to it, but guess what? It's going to buy you back X amount of time. And that savings is immense when it comes to not only accuracy of the product, but also how you're going to get to the next one. And again, having a digitized record of exactly what's been going on, right? Rather than somebody's internal instinctual knowledge or just tribal knowledge of the project, which you can't extract, right? You do need that visibility that a Marked Up, provides. You need the visibility of when was it marked up? What is it marked up for? Who did it go to? You need all of those things, right? Especially as the coming of the digital age becomes basically just a ticket of requirement. It becomes a license deal, like, hey, you're going to get this contract if you've got these items in place and you can show me these digital receipts for what's going on. And man, time flies when you're having fun, right? Because we've burned it. So before we go, I want Chris, I'm going to have you back because we've had a great conversation and I think we've got, a lot to talk about. But let's wrap this up and just letting the folks know, how do we get a hold of you, Christopher? How do we get in touch with Marked Up AI?
Well, look, so many ways. Come check me out on LinkedIn, Christopher James Mouflard, my whole name. You can find us on YouTube or Marked Up AI. We got tons of content. You can go to our website, markedup.ai, or find us on Instagram for Marked Up Plans. One thing that we do have for everybody, 100% free, you don't even need to log in. We have a Blueprint Academy. It's a free 10-part course that just teaches people the basics of how to read drawings. And again, this is just because we feel that I don't want future Harrys and future people in the industry to leave these exceptional schools and not have the most important foundational skill in this industry, which is, what am I looking at when I look down on this drawing set? 2D is the thing in construction. So
yeah.
Thanks.
So I think maybe next time we get together here in about a month or so, because I'm going to invite you back, I want to talk about just that thing, because I think it's super important. I think it's important that we understand that there's some free resources out there for those folks that need to see it. It could be utilized by a company, could be utilized by just an individual, but I definitely want to talk about that next time we get on here. Because I think that's a huge thing. Thank you so much, Christopher, for being with me today. I appreciate you.
Thank you, Robert. I'm so grateful to you. Thank you, sir.
Yeah. All ConTech fans out there, thank you very much for being with us. And we're going to see you next week. Until then, y'all be safe, and we'll talk to you soon.